Hey guys, quick update for the Fueltech G body. Second update here, hopefully faster than the last one. Got the intake permanently mounted on. We got all the fuel lines made. The intercooler piping is done. Reclocked the blower so it's facing. It used to be a blow-through setup, so it went right from the blower right to the carburetor. Now we're have it angled towards the fender, down through the fender, down under the frame. We got a couple nice serrated couplers down there from FFE. It goes into the intercooler, Garrett intercooler. We built the end tanks on, and then it comes back out under the frame, and we got the intake piping is done. I have it off the car right now, but it comes up between the motor and the fan shroud, up and over, and then into the throttle body. I welded a bung for the intake air temp sensor to the bottom of it, so you really can't see it. Sensor's going to plug in right here. Like I said, we got the fuel lines. I got the crossover line done. I changed the old carbureted setup. Used to have a -8 feed, -10 return. Flipped that around, so now we got a -10 feed, -8 return. -10 is here, comes up from the bottom of the car into this 45, into the back of the fuel rail, through the feeler and around. And then we have the return comes out here. It's going to go back under the coils into this regulator, which I moved. The regulator used to be over here. Moved it to the back, a little bit cleaner. It's going to come in here, and then it comes out the bottom. I got a -8 swivel, -8 into here, which also goes down to the bottom of the car and into the back of the trunk, into the fuel cell. Got the sensor block mounted permanently. For those that don't know, these transducer pressure sensors really don't like vibration. So if you can, you're better off mounting these into one of these distribution blocks instead of mounting this is the oil pressure sensor. Instead of mounting it directly to the motor with a lot of vibration, they usually don't last as long. You mount it to one of these distribution blocks, and then what you do is you run like a -4 AN line from the oil sending unit port on the block, wherever you're getting your oil pressure from, and you run a -4 line to here, and then you hook this sensor up in here. This is a 4-port, so basically each one of these is a port, and it doesn't communicate with any of the rest. So oil pressure is going to come into here. The sensor for that's here. This one is going to be for fuel pressure, which is going to go right into the regulator here, and just a short -4 line into that. I got the coil harness completely done. I got the coils are all mounted. The whole wiring harness is in and cleaned up as much as possible. There's an insane amount of wiring that comes with the Fueltech Pro harness. But the harness itself is awesome. It makes everything really easy. Super high quality too. But some of the stuff I'm not using, like the EGT plugs and some of the boost reference plugs and stuff that I'm not using. They can be repurposed for any other kind of pressure sensor you want, but I'm just not using them. So right now they're out of the way, but you got all that wiring. You got to make it as nice as possible. But like I said, the coils are all mounted, plugged in, ready to go. I have the cam sync in. It's not done yet. What I got going on now is when the car had the carbureted setup on it with the crank trigger using the MSD, I think I had it set to like 40 or 35 degrees with the magnet down there. And the problem is I need to set it to 50 degrees before top dead center for the crank sync. And I don't have a good spot. My adjuster there won't get to a magnet. So if I put the crank at 50 degrees before top dead center, one of the 4 magnets is so far that I can't get to it with the adjustment on that bracket that comes with the crank sensor down here. That bracket has a sliding adjustment. So what I have to do is I just have to pop the blower pulley off, and then I can spin the crank trigger wheel's index, so you can spin it around and get those 4 magnets in different spots on your timing. And I'll just find one that I do have adjustment to get to. So just got to set the motor at 50 degrees before top dead center on the compression stroke for cylinder 1, and then, like I said, take the blower pulley off and get the crank wheel, trigger wheel, into a spot where that sensor can pick it up. And then I also have to set it to 70 degrees before top dead center, is what Fueltech told me, and that's where I'm going to set the cam sync up. So I just have to take off the belt for the alternator water pump and the blower belt so I can get that crank pulley off. I'm going to move the catch can. Catch can used to be on that delete plate, but I got so much stuff going on back there that I'm just going to not do that anymore. So I'm probably going to put it somewhere up here, somewhere in the front corner of the motor where the old regulator used to be. I'll get it mounted up, weld something up or something. I got to do that next. Like I said, with the timing, outside of setting the timing, and I do have to buy those 2-4 lines I was talking about that go to the sensor block. I don't have the proper lengths. On the start block, the pressure sending unit for the block, the oil pressure is down in the back a bit, so I have to get a line that's going to come out of the back and then loop up under with all the wiring and then go over to the sensor block over there. So I got to get 2 of those, one for the oil, one for the fuel, and then set the timing and clear out all the fuel lines. I'm going to just run some fuel through them into a bucket because there's a bunch of rubber from cutting those things with a whiz wheel, so I'm going to get that out of there before I start the car up. That's pretty much it. The thing, it should be ready to fire up after that. Everything else is wired and ready to go. Also, so the Fueltech, I kind of went over this last time, but the Fueltech, the main harness is this one here, plugged into this bulkhead, this bigger one, and that's going to run all the sensors. It runs all the fuel injectors. I believe it would also run, if you were just running a regular distributor, it would run that as well. That's all you would need. It has your TPS on there, oil pressure sensor. The thing is, and so you have this basic harness. It has a bulkhead here that goes into the car. And then it also has a power and a ground. So the ECU gets power and ground that goes directly to the battery here. Always to the battery for the ECU. Never go off a distribution block for the power to the ECU. If you're going to run individual coil unplugged like I have set up here, you have to buy the separate engine. You have to buy the separate coil harness, which has, it's pretty simple itself. All the Fueltech harness stuff has been awesome. Just a lot of wires, but the quality is really good. It's got 8 wires or 8 plugs that on the engine side, 1 for each coil, and it also then has one of these ground terminal rings. Has 2 of them. One goes onto the passenger head, one goes on the passenger head, one goes on the driver head. And then the coil harness itself also has a power and ground that has to go directly to the battery. So you can see here, I have a power and ground for the ECU. These 2 are for the ECU, this one's for the coil, and then another power and ground over here, one's for the ECU, and one is for the coil. But the Fueltech is nice because it really makes it easy to service this thing if you gotta get out of the way. Just kind of give it a couple turns of the bulkhead connector, and then the bulkhead connector pops right out. And then you have the whole wiring harnesses ready to get out of your way instead of having to drag it and pull it out of the car and stuff like that and pull it to the firewall. You can just use the bulkhead connector. Same thing with the coil harness. It has its own bulkhead connector as well. One cool thing I found while doing all this wiring is these magnetic zip tie mounts. So you have this little zip tie mount here. I didn't really get it all done yet, but for some wires to get out of the way of the exhaust and stuff. And they go through that little loop there on this mount, and the mount is magnetic. And it doesn't look like a lot, but these magnets hold about 10 pounds, so they almost hold as much as these small little zip ties are going to hold anyway. So I wouldn't hang bricks off of them, but for tightening up wires and stuff, they're awesome. I got one down here to kind of keep this wiring all tidy. It's way better than drilling holes all over the car. I also have a couple back down in there where that giant mess of stuff is going on. For the engine harnesses, it runs across that way. Inside the car, we're really pretty much done. I apologize, guys. I'm not sure what's going on, but the video keeps getting cut off, so I'm going to have to do this in a couple segments. Interior is basically completely in the car now. We have the dash in. The dash panel I made is done. I got the, for those that don't know, the Fueltech, the ECU is the dash. So I got the dash mounted, the display with the ECU. I have 2 O2s in this car. Each one of these are the O2 displays that run the wide bands. I'm going to have a left and a right header. And I also put some blinkers in here because I drive the car in the street. Radio delete. The car's never had a radio or heat. So I made this simple delete panel. This here is getting, I took the power from the cigarette lighter. Now I'm using this just for USB power. It's got 2 ports in there for charging a cell phone or plugging a laptop in or whatever. This port here is another USB port. So basically the back of the ECU is where you plug in to tune it, get your data logs and stuff. Instead of having to take the ECU off all the time, I hardwired a USB cable from the back of that. It runs through the dash to the back of this bulkhead here. And then so whenever I want to connect to the ECU, I just plug the computer right into here. And it's all done, connected, ready to go. like I said, the interior is basically done. Just going to get the steering wheel mounted back up, clean it up because it's an absolute mess from all the wiring and stuff. But otherwise, interior is ready to go. In the trunk of the car, pretty much done here as well. The return line here, the dash 8 comes into the trunk through a bulkhead into the corner of the tank. This is a dash 10, just a vent with a rollover check valve in there. The feed is under the trunk. The only wiring I need to do here is I already have the red, orange, and green wires I have for ECU power. I got ECU 12 volt, ECU 5 volt, ECU ground, and then I got a couple sensor wires ran to the front of the car. I'm going to run the powers and the grounds through this distribution block here. I have to run, in order to get the sending unit to work with the Fueltech ECU, what you want to do is, instead of running just a regular chassis ground, you run the ECU ground to it. So this gets an ECU ground, and then the signal wire, just like a regular signal wire, goes back to the ECU. And that should get you the data you need for the fuel level sending unit. And then the other thing I need to wire up is it's going to go down, the wiring is going to go down through the tub here under the car, is going to be for the flex fuel sensor that I have mounted inside the Motion Raceworks flex fuel sensor mount. Alright guys, down under the car now. It's pretty filthy under here. We did a bunch of no prep stuff at the end of last year and I never got a chance to clean it. You got the bottom of the sump under the trunk, dash 10 feed into the pre-filter. Pre-filter is a 40 micron. Then dash 10 into the Weldon pump. Another dash 10 into the Motion Raceworks flex fuel mount. So the flex fuel sensor mount, for those that don't know, you generally want to run, if you can, your flex fuel sensor in your feed. If you can run it into the return line, the problem is if you're on the edge of your pump's capability and you're wide open throttle, you might not be returning much, if any, fuel. And if that's the case, there might not be enough fuel inside the sensor to get an accurate reading. The problem with running around the feed is the orifice that the filter uses is extremely small. I think it's less than a dash 6. So if you're making some power, you're really not going to be able to flow enough through it. So the Motion Raceworks is dual channel. The fuel comes into here. Part of it branches off and goes through the sensor. The other part goes up and over this way into something that's about the size of a dash 10. So basically you have, I think, enough fuel to flow almost dash 12 through this. And then you still get your readings, plenty of flow. You don't have to worry about restricting it. You don't have to worry about getting bad readings from the sensor. And it takes a standard GM sensor, and the way they built this thing, you can mount it in a million ways. You can also swing the sensor up and down to get it up out of the way. Do whatever you want with it. It's just 3 wires. It's ECU voltage. I think it's 5 volts. ECU ground, and then signal. That goes into dash 10 air motive filter. I got a 10 micron microglass filter. You don't really want to use paper on E85. You might get away with it. You might not. It might just crumble the paper and turn it to mush. So you want to run the microglass stuff. Works really good. Out of that, dash 10 up and over the rear end to the front of the car, up to the motor. Also, since last time, I got the Motion Raceworks Driveshaft sensor mounted. So you got the Motion Raceworks sensor, and I also have the 16-tooth wheel mounted to the yoke. That is all wired and ran up to the front of the car. I also use those magnets that I was showing before to get this up to the front of the car without getting destroyed by the drive shaft. So that goes up and over to the tunnel, and then up the trans tunnel, drive shaft tunnel, and with those magnets mounted, to keep out of the way of the exhaust and out of the way of the drive shaft. Alrighty, that's pretty much it. Like I said, we hopefully starting this thing this week or next week. I'll probably throw an update when I do that. Just waiting on setting the timing. Probably gonna do that right now. I'm probably gonna get these belts off so I can get the crank pulley off and set the timing for the crank trigger and also the cam sync. And I also just got to get those dash 4 lines. It's gonna run the oil pressure over to the sensor block, and also a smaller line that's gonna run the fuel pressure over to that sensor block. So when I get that all done, I'll send another update. All right, guys.